Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian makes the team collaboration software that powers enterprise businesses around the world, including over 80% of the Fortune 500. With Atlassian's AI-powered software like Jira, Confluence, and Loom, you'll have more time to do the work that matters. In fact, Atlassian customers experience a 25% reduction in project duration per year. Unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.
Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means. That's Stefan Krajisnik, and that's Andrew Gillis. And if you're watching this on YouTube, what's up, folks? Look at the floating heads about to talk about Ohio State losing its other coordinator. Jim Knowles is already headed off to Penn State. He's already there, by the way, doing interviews and sit-downs and whatnot. Chip Kelly, Stefan, is now also leaving there. There have been maybe some talks about him leaving off for the NFL. There have been a few teams, involved. It's football. It's school. It's still school. It's just not, you don't get letter grades. You get raises, you get cut, and you get traded and all that stuff. Chip Kelly is leaving to go be the offensive coordinator for the Las Vegas Raiders. Stefan, when this news first dropped, there was maybe a poetic way I looked at it, but there's also just a logical way to look at things for Chip Kelly. Justin Frye has also left for the NFL. He's the Arizona Cardinals' new offensive line coach. Andrew and I talked about that in the video. It's essentially more of a, okay, where should Ohio State look next with its offensive line coach? Maybe more of a recruiter than a developer, or maybe a guy who could do both of those things, because this is Ohio State at the end of the day, right? But with Chip Kelly, Stefan, I don't think this was a shocker of a ending result with this, especially when you think about the way he talked about why he was here in the first place. It was to get back to being about ball and not worrying about all the stuff that goes into being a college football head coach nowadays. And he got a chance to do that in Columbus, and now he's getting $6 million to do it in Las Vegas. That seems like a very 1 + 1 = 2 situation for him.
Yeah, definitely not a bad move when you consider the raise. Ryan Day talked about it. The video surfaced Sunday night after the Chip Kelly move on the Joel Klatt show that, the plan was always, hey, Chip, come here, come help me win a national title because of the roster that Ohio State had in place going into the 2024 season. Come help me win a national title, and then we'll see if you want to stay, if you want to go to the NFL. It's clear that those were kind of the two options that were always going to be there for Chip Kelly. He was either going to stay at Ohio State and be the offensive coordinator, or he was going to take a job in the NFL. And, his name had been rumored surrounding the Texans job. I think the Jaguars job had kind of linked his name a bit. The Vegas job, there actually hadn't been a ton of murmurs about it, at least going into Sunday. And it seemed to move kind of quick with Pete Carroll hiring him as the offensive coordinator there. So I don't know if it was ever set out right, but you could always kind of see the writing on the wall that the decision was going to be between staying at Ohio State and going to the NFL, and not much else was going to be considered. And I'm sure the Rays played a big part in it, but I'm also sure that, just getting away from the college game was something that Chip Kelly was looking forward to doing. He's a West Coast guy now. Oregon, coached the 49ers, was at UCLA for a while. We saw him recruiting a bit out on the West Coast, after the national championship game. So it's clear that that's an area he's familiar with. So getting to go out to Vegas, I'm sure was part of it as well. So as much as it was surprising in the sense that we hadn't seen a ton out there linking him to the Raiders, it also wasn't very surprising because I think everyone kind of knew that there was a chance that he was going to take an NFL job just because of all those reasons I mentioned. So it makes sense. I think it's a great move for him. I think it's a great move for the Raiders as they kind of get ready to make this transition into the next part of their franchise's history. Um, there's already tweets out there being like, all right, which pick are they using on Will Howard? Because we all know that the Raiders use the quarterback. I'm sure they're going to make more of a push for Shadur Sanders, but I'm sure if Will Howard's available maybe later on and they still don't have a quarterback, maybe it is something they consider. So I'm excited about watching Chip in the NFL just in terms of, being a football fan. I think he's obviously one of the best offensive minds in football history. And, we saw his offense and the way it worked when he was, with the Eagles. And I don't know if we'll see that much tempo with the Raiders. I guess that kind of depends on the quarterback situation, what Pete Carroll wants to do. But I'm excited as a neutral football observer. And now we kind of move on in terms of Ohio State and see what does Ryan Day do next.
That tempo stuff was great for like the first 2 or 3 weeks. Then you realize, oh, wait, there's 16 football games. You should slow down. Imagine him doing that and realizing, oh, wait, there's 17 football games plus 3 or 4 playoff games. You should slow down. I think last year
it helped that Michael Vick, too.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Michael Vick helps a lot of things. As a Falcons fan here, he helps a lot of things until he doesn't help those things. And then he helps them again. You love a good redemption story. Will Howard, 4,010 yards and 35 touchdowns on 73 completion percentage this year. And due to all three of those numbers, led the Big Ten. He also averaged 9.5 yards per attempt, while Chip Kelly was his offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. 5-star quarterback Brady Edmonds from the 2027 recruiting class committed to Ohio State, while Chip Kelly was the quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator. Travion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins both had 1,000-yard seasons, while Chip Kelly was the offensive coordinator. Jeremiah Smith became a Greek god, and Emeka Egbuka got his second career 1,000-yard season, while Chip Kelly was the offensive coordinator. Even through all the offensive line struggles that they had because of injuries, they figured it out while Chip Kelly was the offensive coordinator. And even before those offensive line injuries, this was the most creative run game we had seen at Ohio State maybe in some time, while Chip Kelly was the offensive coordinator. Andrew, I would consider 1-year rental for Chip Kelly. Job well done for Ohio State. He essentially checked off everything that Ryan Day brought him here to check off.
Yeah, like the thing that I thought of was, you guys are all professional sports fans. Like you all have a team. Like the people that are watching this probably have a team. If you've ever rooted for a team that makes a big splash at the trade deadline and they bring in a rental for, the remaining 20% of the season and they give up a prospect or two, or they pay, they have a 1-year free agent and they just pay.
Why are you bringing up the Los Angeles Lakers and Dallas Mavericks on this?
No, I'm not bringing up Nico Harrison on this podcast. But I think when you look at that, it's kind of like, it doesn't really matter what you gave up. It doesn't really matter how things played out before that, right? I don't think anybody really cares that, if you go make a big swing like that and then you win a championship, nobody, it doesn't matter. And for Ohio State, that's what happened. And
they also didn't have to give up anything.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, it's almost like a big 1-year deal, unless you consider give up something as in you had to make him one of the highest paid coordinators in college football. Maybe that's it, but that's kind of it. And Steven, you and I and Nathan talked about this a year ago, where we were kind of having this debate of how long do we think Chip Kelly's here? We were let's be real here. How long is Chip Kelly around? Because he doesn't want to do the recruiting side of things. He doesn't want to be kind of involved in that sphere. And I sent this out to our subtexters, 614-350-3315. I was like, guys, there's not a lot of recruiting news here. There's not a lot of impact here because the quarterbacks are committing because of Ryan Day's history.
Mm-hmm.
And the receivers are committing because of Brian Hartline. And offensive linemen are committing because of whoever the offensive line coach is. And running backs are coming in because of Carlos Loughlin. Chip Kelly was not kind of the driving force behind that. I'm sure he helped, but he was not the main recruiter. So, for Ohio State, it's absolutely, a home run. You won a national championship with this guy. And I think we could always see this coming at some point. And the thing for me is that when you have an NFL job like this open up, there's 32 of them in the NFL, and not all of those jobs have play calling attached to it. Like Chip Kelly's going to go to the Raiders and call plays because Pete Carroll's his head coach. Like Zach Taylor in Cincinnati calls his own plays. I think he definitely used to. Like there are coaches in the NFL that call their own plays, and Chip Kelly gets the chance to not only like triple his salary from what he was making in Columbus, he goes to Vegas and kind of gets a fresh start. He gets an offense that was, I mean, you look at the talent. I wonder if he's going to walk into that room and go, man, we were more talented in Columbus than we were in Vegas. You look at some of the receivers and some of the running backs on that team, that needs help. But I think there is some excitement in that. You get to build this up from the ground. You have an experienced head coach in Pete Carroll, which very weird to say Pete Carroll's the coach of the Raiders. But you get this entire new opportunity of he gets to call his plays in the NFL. He gets to coach on that coaching staff in the NFL. He gets to be in the NFL again. I think we could always see this coming, and good for Chip Kelly and, good for Ohio State, because I think this was kind of the deal that you made where, you knew that this was always a possibility.
Well, I think what's interesting too is, when Jim Knowles left, I think one thing that you heard a lot of people say was sometimes coaches and coordinators just kind of look for a new challenge, right? And sometimes that's becoming a head coach somewhere. Sometimes it's going to a school that you grew up, rooting for and wanted to take them to the next level. I mean, think about that for Chip Kelly, regarded as one of the greatest offensive minds. He's about to go up against Jim Harbaugh twice a year. He's about to go up against that Broncos defense twice a year. He's about to go up against Andy Reid and the Chiefs twice a year. Like, if you want a challenge, go to that division, and try to call plays on offense.
Yeah, good luck trying to scheme up ball around Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and apparently Bo Nix, maybe.
It's not even that. It's
Chris Jones and Bosa.
The key defensive coordinator is him. I'm just gonna be real with you. He is him, 100% him. Pay him whatever he wants. As you mentioned, Andrew, there's no really recruiting hit because the quarterbacks are coming here because Ryan Day is here. The bigger conversation with this, especially since this is now the third assistant coach that Ryan Day is leaving, he's also losing some support staff members. Like Alan Clark is headed to Texas as their outside linebackers coach. Riley Larkin is headed to the NFL. Mike Saline was hired as UNLV's offensive line coach. I think there are some texters, 614-350-3315, who are looking at this and going, what is going on? Why is everybody leaving? The staff is falling apart. That's not necessarily what's happening here. This is just par for the course. When you win, in professional sports, when you win, people steal your style. In college sports, when you win, people steal your personnel. Now, all of it, because of the world we live in, that now applies to your players as much as it does your assistant coaches and support staff members, which is why you have to spend every offseason retaining your roster. But this is par for the course. This is a sign of a healthy program. And it's now Ryan Day's new challenge and having to replace coordinators and assistant coaches year after year after year. This is why often you hear people talk about how assistant coaches are like middle managers. They're all replaceable. Now, there's people like Brian Hartline. There's people like Tim Walton. There's people like Larry Johnson in his heyday. Kerry Combs when he was in his heyday in the 2010s. There's other people around the country as well, where every so often you find an assistant coordinator who doesn't fit that description, who maybe is a little bit more valuable. So you do everything you can possibly do to hold on to that person. But for the most part, this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
And to your point with Andrew, you're talking about Chip Kelly. He wasn't, from a recruiting standpoint, he could recruit, so that's what makes him different from Jim Knowles. He could do the recruiting. He just didn't necessarily have to because of the position he was in. He's the chef.
Yeah.
Everybody else is going grocery shopping. Brian Hartline brought the steak. Ryan Day brings the rice. Whoever the new offensive line coach is, he brings in the vegetables. Somebody brings somebody brings a drink. Everybody brings in all this stuff, and then it's the coordinator's job to cook it all up and make a good meal. Well, so on offense, you got a good meal this year. On defense, you got a good meal this year. Now Ryan Day's got to go find a new chef and a few new grocery shoppers as well.
I think it's interesting that you use the offensive line as the vegetables, but I get where you're going from. Like, I get where you're getting. I get where you're getting at.
Part of the meal. It's a healthy. Nobody likes the vegetables, but if you don't eat your vegetables for a while,
yeah, exactly,
you'll mess your system up. Don't have some offensive linemen. Go look at the Nebraska game.
To your point, though, there was one coach on this staff and that's Jim Knowles, that left for a job that's
Lateral.
in essence a lateral move.
Yeah.
And even still, he got a massive raise when he did go to Penn State. So,
Right.
I understand that, you could have stayed at Ohio State and also gotten a fairly large raise. You just had the best defense in college football for 2 years in a row. Like, obviously that could have worked out, but he gets a massive raise and goes to Penn State. And then I think the interesting thing about this. I think there's a lot of people who are worried, but I think also a lot of people get it. Chip Kelly is leaving for the NFL. He's leaving to go call plays in the best football league in the world.
The SEC.
Yeah, right. Justin Frye is going to coach the offensive line in the NFL. You mentioned Mike Soline. He's now the offensive line coach at UNLV. Promotion. Alan Clark. Promotion. Like, all these guys are getting promotions, and it's a positive thing. Like you said, it's a positive thing that the NFL looks at Chip Kelly and says, come back. We think this can work. Like, we think that the second time around, this can work, especially if you're not, doing everything you did in Philly with roster management stuff.
Yeah,
that's a positive thing.
It's come back, but just call plays. Don't run the entire organization. You can come back, but just do this thing.
Don't Deshaun Jackson.
Carlos Loughlin said something during fall camp when we asked him about Caleb Downs and running back snaps. And he was like, Coach Loughlin fries. Come back, but you're on fries. Stay away from the register. Stay away. Make the best fries in the city.
I will say one thing too. We talk about some of the support staff, the GAs that leave. Like, those are not relationships that are just gone, and those guys will never help Ohio State again. Like, how many times when there's a DC search, you're going through candidates, you're like, oh, that guy worked at Ohio State a decade ago. Like, he's got these guys can go out and kind of make a name for themselves and potentially return one day as coordinators or position coaches. Like, this is not, it's not all bad when people leave.
This is how Ryan Day ended up the head coach at Ohio State.
Yeah.
He was a GA for Urban Meyer at Florida. And then he was just hanging around in San Francisco, coaching up the quarterbacks for the 49ers, and Urban Meyer needed a coordinator. And he said, hey, let's bring that guy in. And then he went, oh, I think that guy's going to take my job one day. And I'm okay with that because I'm retiring. That's how this works. That's how the world works. So we'll see what happens in those situations. The poetic part, Stefan and Andrew, I think is really good here. And because everybody loves poetry. Everybody loves some narratives, right? Ryan Day was at a pivotal point in his career last year.
Chip Kelly doesn't like narratives. He told us that.
No, he doesn't. He'll call you out. I'm like, is that a narrative? I love that. That was my favorite Chip Kelly moment of the season. He just went, is that a narrative? I'm going to miss Chip Kelly some days. But Ryan Day and Chip Kelly really were at pivotal moments in their career a year ago. Chip Kelly was at UCLA where things were starting to kind of fall apart there on him after a couple of successful years there. And as I mentioned earlier, he just seemed kind of done with where college football was and what it had kind of become here. And it wasn't really about football anymore, being a head coach. And so he wanted an out. Well, Ryan Day was evolving as a head coach, and he was ready to give up play calling. Obviously, he first gave it up to Bill O'Brien, and then the Boston College said, hey, Jeff Hafley went to the NFL. We need a head coach. And Bill O'Brien said, okay, I'll come back to Boston. So Ryan Day went back out. But if you don't realize it, Chip Kelly, I think, was the first person Ryan Day called. And Chip Kelly just wasn't ready to make that move yet, which is how he ended up with Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien goes to Boston College. Ryan Day kind of doubles back to Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly is ready to do that now. So two guys who have known each other for over 25 years, Chip Kelly's his mentor. Ryan Day got to give his mentor an out in college football and just worry about ball. And he also got to give the thing he loves the most about being a college football coach to somebody who trusts more than anybody else on the planet when it comes to football. And it gave them both an opportunity to grow. Now Chip Kelly can take that opportunity back to the NFL, and we'll see how Ryan Day handles things going forward if he trusts anybody else to call plays after giving it up to Chip Kelly last year. And that is what we're going to get into for the rest of this pod, trying to figure out what description Ryan Day should go after for both sides of the ball when it comes to his coordinators. If you're watching on YouTube, go find Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts and get the text 614-350-3315. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. For those of you already listening to the pod, we'll see you after the break here on Buckeye Talk.
Don't miss the first Marvel movie event of the year.
The country needs Captain America.
You asked for me. Here I am. On February 14th, get the suits ready. Experience a brave new world. Let's go! That's made for IMAX. Stand by for proof of death. You want me? Come and get me! Captain America Brave New World. See it in IMAX February 14th. Get tickets now. Rated PG-13. This film may be inappropriate for children under 13.
We're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. We are going to have a discussion about how Ryan Day should replace his coordinators. Stefan, you've been writing posts because you're a journalist. Every time Ohio State has lost a human being this offseason, it's been fantastic the way we've been turning these stories. You should go read them at cleveland.com/OSU. And the stories are essentially just who's replacing these guys. And it's a list of guys on both sides of the ball. And it's actually what sparked the idea to do this pod, because if you look at some of these lists you've had, they are all over the place in terms of description with these offensive coordinators and these defensive coordinators in terms of who should be replacing these guys. So let's start with, just because we're already in the theme of it, let's start on the offensive side of the ball. Here is a description of what Ohio State is right now. You are a prominent program with a ridiculous amount of offensive talent for any offensive coordinator to work with. You are also signing up to be the head coach, be the coordinator of a head coach who is an offensive-minded coach, who is also a quarterback's coach by trade. You don't have to make any assistant coaching hires. You don't have to do anything. You just have to come in here and, as I said in the first segment, be a chef. All the ingredients are going to be put on a counter for you. You just have to cook them and prepare a good meal. Ryan Day's offensive coordinators have been Chip Kelly, who is an older guy, experienced guy along the way. Does he have to go that route again? Does he have to go get a Chip Kelly? Or can he go the Brian Hartline route? Or can he go the hot shot, up-and-coming offensive coordinator who has been at maybe some smaller schools and is looking for his shot with the big leagues guy? I guess those would be the three categories, right? I would almost call it Chip Kelly, Brian Hartline, hot shot, because I don't know who the hot shot offensive coordinator is right now.
Well, and I don't think the hot shot has to be, an up-and-coming. Like, Will Stein at Oregon is established. He's
Right.
young. He's young, but like he's at Oregon, right? Like it doesn't have to be a coordinator at, a G5 school. Like you can go for a coordinator in the Big Ten.
Yeah, no, that's right. It doesn't have to. Yeah, you don't have to go get Jason Candle. You can go get Will Stein potentially. You're Ryan Day. What are you inclined to do in that situation? Because I don't know what the best next step here is. When you essentially last year was like, not only you needed to give up play calling, you needed to prove you could give up play calling and be fine with it. So what do you think he should do in this position?
Well, I think this is going to be maybe the most interesting hire of Ryan Day's tenure, just because he's going to have to go more out of his comfort zone than we saw last year, right? Like last year, he wanted Chip Kelly originally. You didn't get him at first, but you got Bill O'Brien, and I know him and Bill O'Brien and Day hadn't really worked that closely together in the past, but like you were getting a guy who is from the Northeast, who's coached Tom Brady and Deshaun Watson with the Texans and Bryce Young to a Heisman campaign. Like Bill O'Brien was a very well established offensive play caller who you could turn to and trust. And when you didn't get him, you literally went right back to Chip Kelly, the guy you've known your entire life, because that's what it took for you to hand over play calling duties. I mean, Ryan Day has told us as much that he didn't want to give up play calling duties. He kind of just felt like he had to. And the first thing that I wrote in that post with, I guess we just call it a hot board. The first thing I wrote was, does Ryan Day just take it back? Does he trust anyone in the first place to hand it over again? So that's I think the first step to all this is, what does Ryan Day want to do? And does he trust, this new, has Chip Kelly taught him to trust, basically, for lack of a better term, throughout this 1 year that he had there? The route that I think I would go, I think first you call a guy like Will Stein, right? You call like the biggest names and see, can you get them? And that, I mean, Will Stein, he's obviously had a ton of success at Oregon with Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel these last 2 years. He's from Louisville. He's a Midwest guy. Does he want to come back? I think you got to kind of kick the tires there, just because I think he's the best offensive coordinator out there right now. But I think the most feasible route, based on Ryan Day's history of making this hire, 1 year history of making this hire, combined with what would be a good hire, is probably getting a head coach from somewhere to come be your coordinator. Now, Chip Kelly was a rare instance where you could take a sitting head coach from a Big Ten school, right? Like, I don't know if you can go into the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, and that easily find another Chip Kelly where someone wants to leave being a head coach to be your coordinator. But I think you can do it at a conference like the MAC. I think Jason Candle would be a great move. I think Joe Moorhead would be a good route to go. Kevin Wilson, who was recently this past year fired from Tulsa, he's obviously got history at Ohio State. I think going out and getting a somewhat established head coach from the G5 level to come be your offensive coordinator, similar to what Kalen DeBoer did with defensive coordinator. He went and got Kane Womack from South Alabama to come be his defensive coordinator at Alabama. I mean, Ryan Day could follow that script to a T by going, to a place like Toledo or Akron, within the state and getting a guy. I think Jason Kendall would be very interesting. Toledo's consistently had one of the best offenses in the MAC. Now, he's a pretty good head coach. He's had success there. Is Kendall a guy who is maybe on the verge of getting some, I mean, it seems like he's talked about every coaching cycle about, being a head coaching candidate. Like, does he think that he's on a route to get a Big Ten head coaching job? I don't know. But I think you kick the tires on guys like that, because that's what worked for you last time. I think that's probably something that Ryan Day is comfortable with, is go get a head coach who wants to just come talk ball and do ball. And maybe they can recruit more than Chip Kelly did. But like that's the opportunity you're going to have. And that's the route that we've seen Ryan Day go in the past. Is that something that maybe he's most comfortable with? It would not surprise me to see a guy like Joe Moorhead or Kevin Wilson get that kind of interest.
I feel like Jason Candle is the new Matt Campbell. Every year he's in something and then he doesn't go anywhere.
And he literally replaced Matt Campbell.
I know. Should that even be a thought in Ryan Day's head to keep it, to just take back play calling? Or is that a step backwards for a guy who just spent the last year seeing, oh, I gave up something important to grow as a head coach, Andrew, and it won me a natty. So how about I take it back?
Well, I think you need to have it in your head as a possibility, because the last thing you want to be is unprepared. Maybe you get Candle and you say, you know what, this guy's got head coaching experience. This guy can call plays. I feel comfortable with it. But let's pretend insert name here is option one, and that guy says no. Or that doesn't work out. And insert option 2 doesn't work out. And insert option 3 is a maybe. Like, say you get down to 3. Let's say you get down to 4. And then you're going, okay, well, maybe I should call plays in this situation. So I think it depends. I think ideally you are bringing in a experienced play caller, somebody who can kind of handle what's going to be a fairly young offense in 2025. You're going to have a second-year starting quarterback. You've got mega weapons at receiver. Like, that's obviously known. But your best running back might be a second-year player. You're losing, obviously, an important offensive line piece in Donovan Jackson. You're losing the genius, I guess, if you want to call it, of Chip Kelly. You're losing a fair amount offensively. So it's, okay, can somebody come in and help this stay at a high level? And maybe an experienced coach does that. So I think it shouldn't be your first choice. I think it shouldn't be your second choice. But I think you do need to have that as a possibility of, okay, if it doesn't go great for us, like if it doesn't go the way we want it to, maybe I need to step into this and call plays again. And then maybe we reevaluate in a year's time. So I think you just need to have that in the back of your head just to be ready. Personally, if I were Ryan Day, I would be saying, I don't want to have to do this. I mean, I know Ryan Day wants to do it. Like, I'm sure it's an ego thing. I'm sure it's, it's what he's comfortable doing. I'm sure he likes doing it, but I don't think that should be his focus right now. So, of course you try not to do it, but I am curious, like, we talk so much about, this veteran experienced offensive coordinator, this veteran experienced, like, bring in the guy who's done it before, who's done it at different places, who knows what he's doing, who's got, a lot of practice at it. Like, there is part of me that kind of wonders, like, is this the right situation maybe to bring in a younger offensive coordinator, a guy who maybe hasn't called plays before, but you think has a really high ceiling? Maybe somebody who's not, 60 years old, somebody who's kind of towards the end of their career, who's been a head coach in two different spots, who's kind of had that Bill O'Brien, Chip Kelly track. I am curious, like, all right, maybe you look at the talent and go, you got kind of a host of 5-star quarterbacks now and on the horizon. You've got the Monstars at receiver. You've got, a good stable of running backs. Like, is this the situation where you can maybe soften the blow of a first-time coordinator or a first-time play caller that you just think has a really high ceiling? That's something I've been thinking about. So I think it just depends on what that hire looks like if you're Ryan Day.
Why should it be Brian Hartline and why shouldn't it be Brian Hartline, Stefan?
I mean, I think I would consider him just because he's been around, the system as long as anyone. I imagine that he would know pretty well what Ryan Day would want him to call in a lot of situations, right? I think they probably are on a pretty similar wavelength. And if it's, it feels like it's probably Brian Hartline's time, if not now, then pretty soon to, have that responsibility. So I think it's someone you should consider. I guess the counter would be, why wouldn't you? Just because he's someone who hasn't done it in the past, and maybe Ryan Day's not comfortable with that yet.
I've been thinking about that because after 6 years being in the same system, getting to see how Tony Alford works, and I know that's a weird first name to start with, but that's where I started with, to see how Justin Frye and Greg Chudrawa ran the offensive line room, to see how Ryan Day ran things when he was the offensive coordinator / head coach, even when he was just the offensive coordinator. Brian Hartline was there first as the GA and then as the interim wide receiver coach in 2018, to see how Kevin Wilson operates, to see how Chip Kelly operates, even to see how Bill O'Brien operates, even if it was only for 10 days or something like that. When you say if not now, when's he going to be able to do it? It's like, yeah, a guy who recruits this well and develops his position this well, you would think he'd be ready to at least and they tried it, Andrew, before the 2023 season. They kind of gave him an opportunity to kind of do a trial run throughout the spring, and it was fine, right? Clearly it wasn't the second coming of Joe Brady down there at LSU that one year, because if it would have been, Ryan Day would have gave up play calling right then and there in 2023 instead of not doing it and then bringing in somebody over Brian Hartline to do it. I think the reason you give it to Brian Hartline, though, is because you think he's ready to do it. I don't think you do it because you are trying to find more reasons to hold on to him. He's going to be an expensive non-play calling coordinator the rest of the time he's at Ohio State. Because you want to know why? We all watch what number 4 did this year. We all watch what number 2 did this year. We all watch what 18 did before that. We all watch what Jackson Smith-Njigba and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave did. That's why. And he's got another one coming. Quincy Porter's a 5-star recruit in the 2025 recruiting class. Chris Henry Jr. is the best wide receiver in the 2026 recruiting class. Jameer Brown is a 5-star recruit in 2027. He's going to keep doing this. So, yes, as long as he's in Columbus, he is going to be a very, very expensive steak. It's going to be a good steak, best steak you ever had, but you're not getting it every weekend, Stefan, right? That's for special occasions. He's getting Valentine's Day anniversary steaks every single week. That's what Brian Hartline is, but you got to pay the price because this is what he's doing for your offense. But Andrew, if I do wonder if Ryan Day decides to go that route, then I do think it goes hand in hand of this is how Ryan Day ends up calling plays again. If he gives it to Brian through the spring because he trusts in it, and then he doesn't see what he likes, and maybe it's a little too late in the game to be trying to pull a Michigan taking Tony Alford from somebody. I don't know if you just want to be in the business of hiring coordinators in June to come, hey, can you come learn this system in 2 months and then teach it to everybody? I just don't know if you want to be doing that. So if he doesn't hire anybody, I'm inclined to think he gives it the Hartline, but I'm not going to be shocked if he takes back play calling. And that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about him going backwards in his development as a head coach because he's putting his trust in someone who should, to both of you guys' point, be ready to do this. And maybe he's just not ready to do this because it's just never meant for him to be a coordinator. Not everybody's a good coordinator, right? Larry Johnson's one of the best defensive line coaches of all time. He's never been a coordinator, right? Maybe he goes that right. Kerry Combs was an awesome cornerbacks coach. God-awful coordinator. And so that is the worry for me of Brian Hartline is really, really, really good at this. And I don't have doubts that he'd be good at being a coordinator. It's just we've seen the other side of sometimes someone is so good at this and then you give them something else and maybe they're not as good at it. I think Kevin Wilson should be his hire or somebody in that vein. And I think for Ryan Day, a guy who is all about trust, that's the first thing. He's got to be able to trust you, that you have his back and all that stuff. Why not bring in a guy who isn't doing anything right now? He's not the head coach at Tulsa anymore. He was literally in the stands at all 4 of the playoff games because his son Toby Wilson was still on the roster. He knows the system in and out. It's an easy transition. It's an easy transition for recruits because a lot of the recruits, Andrew, a lot of these recruits have been getting recruited by a lot of these other assistant coaches throughout the years. Kevin Wilson was there at the beginning of their recruitments because he was still the tight ends coach / offensive coordinator here. I think he's perfect. It's simple. It's technically an outside hire because he wasn't here last year, but there's no introductory period. Kevin Wilson can just come in and keep doing what you've been doing.
Well, between that and the opening that Justin Frye left, Kevin Wilson has to be somewhere on this staff. I think.
Just saying. Ryan Day, go coach the quarterbacks. Actually, no, don't do that. I take that back. Lincoln Riley does that, and the quarterbacks are awesome, and everywhere else is.
Yeah, I don't know why you guys have been so quick to dismiss Lincoln Riley, Ohio State offensive coordinator. I don't know why we haven't had that conversation on Buckeye Talk. Like, I don't know. We're slipping as a podcast, apparently. That would be fun. They just did it. They just hired an LA school's head coach to be their offensive coordinator. Now you're telling me they can't do it again?
I'd call him.
I don't think it's.
I'd call Lane Kiffin.
Yeah,
I'd be like,
yeah.
You can come tweet all you want over here.
Yeah, Quinshawn Judkins is gone. You don't have to have that awkward hallway interaction. But
Davis and Igbinosun and Taiwan Malone are still here, and they also left Lane Kiffin to come play for Ryan Day.
Fair. To your point, Stephen, or I guess to your questions, I should say, why it should be Brian Hartline is because if he's gonna make this leap, like, if not now, when? Kind of to your point, like, he's been on this staff he started as a quality control guy, then became the receivers coach. He's been on this staff since 2017. He's been on a staff. He's played in the NFL. He's been on staff with Urban Meyer. He's been on staff with Ryan Day. He's been on staff with Chip Kelly. He's been on staff with Kevin Wilson. He's been on a staff with guys who have called offensive game plans before. Justin Frye, run game coordinator, right? Like, you've been in the meeting rooms and you've been around it. You're 38 years old. You start to think, okay, if Hartline is going to make this move, this might be the time. You're coming off a national championship, and maybe this is a negative way to think about it. You're coming off a national championship. Maybe you have some goodwill built up to where it's like, okay, like, we have the ability to make maybe a riskier move. We have the ability to give Brian Hartline a first-time play caller role. We can do that because of how he's recruited the receiver position, because of everything I just mentioned about the talent on this team. It's not like he's coming in and going, all right, I got to scheme up some ball around some talent deficiencies here. Like, this is going to be a problem. He's going to walk out there for the most of the games that he plays and says, we've got a matchup advantage here, 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 and here. And that's going to be that way for most of the year until they get to the college football playoff. And even then, I think we just saw, like, at least at receiver, you felt that Ohio State had some significant advantages. So for me, it's like, if not now, when? That would be the why not Brian Hartline. Like, he's been on this staff, I think, long enough to where a role like that would make sense. Why it shouldn't be is pretty simple. You don't want to upset the apple cart because you got a good thing going, I think, right now with Brian Hartline, where he's bringing in these just war machines at receiver every single year. Because, like, the 2021 recruiting class, the number one player at receiver in the 247 composite was Emeka Egbuka. And we talk about him as like a first-round player. And the funny thing about Emeka is we're like, he's one of the better receivers I've ever seen who was never the best receiver on his own team. And that's how good the room is. You know who number 2 is? Ja'Cory Brooks from Alabama. Number 3 is Troy Franklin from Oregon. Number 4 is Mario Williams, who went to Oklahoma. I forget how to pronounce this guy's name. Hall from Bama. JoJo Earl was 6. Dante Thornton Jr., 7, Oregon. Xavier Worthy, 8, Texas. 9, Deion Smith, LSU. Christian Leary, 10, Alabama. The reason I bring up all those names is you still got to develop these kids. It's not just like you could just say, hey, bring me a 5-star, thanks, you're going to be great. Like, Jeremiah Smith would have been awesome at Northern Illinois. He would have been awesome at Ohio State. He would have been awesome at Rice. He would have been awesome at San Diego State. He would have been awesome wherever Jeremiah Smith shows up at.
That was a weird grouping of schools that you just put Jeremiah Smith with.
Well, yeah, I'm picking random schools across the country.
Yeah, I know. I feel like you just hit the randoms button on College Football 25.
Yeah, it's great.
I feel like
that would have been a good bet.
I feel like if you asked Jeremiah Smith where all those schools are located that you just listed, he'd go, I didn't know those were schools.
I would bet you he could get Northern Illinois because he would say in Northern Illinois. I don't think he would tell you it's in DeKalb, Illinois. But
yeah, that's what I'm saying. You got to name the city. You can't just
name
no region.
Shot. But my that goes back to my point. It's like you still need to develop these guys, and it's like anything you could do that might hurt that development would scare me a little bit. I personally wouldn't have a problem with them making Brian Hartline the offensive coordinator, making him the play caller, just giving him the reins and saying, you've been doing this long enough. You know, you can handle this. You know, we trust you. We believe in you. But that would be the concern for me. That would be like the worry of, you know, you bring in elite level guys, but you still got to develop them. Like these guys still need to develop as players and develop as receivers. And Brian Hartline's been elite at that. And I think having him do that and just say, you know what, let's just keep things the way they've been going on. That to me is not crazy either.
I wanted to be a Hartline though, because they were going to go 4 wide receiver more often. But that's just Steven being selfish. Young guy. Okay. Describe your guy, Stefan. Describe him to a T. Let's take the names away. Describe give us a description for Ohio State's offensive coordinator in 2025. For what's best for Ohio State and what's best for Ryan Day.
Group of 5 head coach in 2024.
Andrew.
I think Tulsa's group of 5 as well. I don't know.
I see where you're going.
Mac and Tulsa.
Okay. I'm gonna go maybe a little more generic. Former play caller who has done it in a capacity at a Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Big 12, potentially Pac-12, depending on when we're talking, type school. A guy who has done it at a level that is, you know, commiserate with Ohio State. Or potentially NFL play caller. If somebody has called plays in the NFL, if that person, hypothetically, whoever this person is, exists out there, that to me would be my first look. I would want somebody who has done it before, somebody who has held the play sheet, put together a game plan, called plays, and you can kind of keep things in place as they are. That would be my first inclination.
I'm going to go back on my word a little bit, because at first I was going to try to describe Kevin Wilson without saying his name, and then Stefan did it, so now I don't have to do it. But the more I think about this,
describe just him though.
Yeah, but in my heart, that's all you were talking about. In my heart, with my candle burning, that's all I thought about. I feel like at Notre Dame, Al Golden and Marcus Freeman were a really good pairing for a defensive coordinator working for someone who also specializes in his side of the ball, because there is something to this young guy, older guy synergy that can allow that to. And I get it. Marcus Freeman can come out and say all he wants, that he got out of Al Golden's way and let him run his stuff. But Ryan Day also told us he was a lot more involved with ball once the regular season is over and they're not in school and it's literally just focusing on the college football playoff and game planning for games. I can guarantee you Marcus Freeman felt the same way about, man, there's nothing happening right now. I can't really – there's portal stuff happening, but that's happening in the background. I'm not worried about a signing class right now because signing day is over with. This is about ball for the next 45 days of my life. Let's me and Al Golden sit down and put together the best possible game plan. And it got them to the national championship game. So I am not – allowing Al Golden to do his job doesn't mean you're completely hands off, especially at Marcus Freeman's age and time as a head coach. That's just not how that works. Nobody's that mature. And so I do wonder, Ryan Day likes that dynamic. If you go back to 2019, Jeff Hafley and his name is escaping me right now. The Michigan's former linebackers coach. His name is escaping. I can't remember his name right now. I'm really bad with names. I'm great with faces, but I'm bad with names. But he went old guy and young guy, and he paired them together. Jim Knowles, more of an older guy, but he also had a mixture of older guy, younger guys within the defensive coaching staff. James Laurinaitis and Matt Guerrero are a little bit younger. Tim Walton and Larry Johnson are a little bit older, so it kind of worked out. I do wonder if on offense this is an opportunity for Ryan Day to go young guy. Young up and to go find Ryan Day, essentially, because that's what Urban Meyer did with him. Ryan Day was just a young guy who had never called plays before. He just had a relationship with Urban Meyer because, again, he was a graduate assistant for him at Florida, and he needed to go reinvent his offense. So he went and found Ryan Day to reinvent his offense and get these quarterbacks to start playing like elite Ohio State quarterbacks. And it worked. But also, I don't think Urban Meyer was completely hands-off in year one, 2017, with the offense. Because you can't do that with a young coordinator. You still got to have a little bit of your finger on the pulse. And I'm wondering if in year 7, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Yeah, year 7, which ironically, this is the last year of Urban Meyer. I wonder if Ryan Day got what he needed out of having Chip Kelly here. And that's, okay, I gave it up. I got to give it up to somebody I trust, so at least there was a lot of a security blanket. It's like the first time you drove a car. You weren't in the car by yourself, right? Somebody was there with you. Okay, this was my year of learning how to do it, how to give it up, how to move forward, how to be fine with it. And now he's ready to go full throttle with it. And so it's not just about, is Brian Hartline ready to call plays? It's about 2023 was about, is Ryan Day ready to not call plays? So let's combine those two things. There is a young guy, whether it's in the building or outside hire, that is ready to be Ohio State's play caller, even if he doesn't have a long, crazy history of calling plays. Ryan Day is also in a position where he's ready to not be a play caller, even if it's what he wants to do. He has come to terms with he cannot do it NBA head coach in college football. It's a very hard thing to do. Kudos to Steve Sarkisian down in Texas for still being able to do it and successfully do it because he's coaching a playoff team. You know who else does it? Lincoln Riley, and they don't make the playoff anymore. So I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say Ryan Day should go find Ryan Day. And maybe Ryan Day is already in the building down the hall helping stock his roster with wide receivers. Or maybe Ryan Day is out at Eugene, Oregon right now, dropping go ball bombs on his head in October. Will Stein at Oregon.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning too that, like, Ryan Day to Urban Meyer was kind of what Hartline is to Ryan Day, right? Like
Yeah.
this was not Urban going out and getting some random guy to come in and call plays for him. He knew Ryan Day very well to that point.
And he said something a couple of years ago, back when he was making a lot of hires from within, that it's one of those things that you say when it works out, he's a genius. When he doesn't work out, it's like, see, this is the problem, right? So when you promote Keenan Bailey, you're a genius for hiring from within. When you promote Brian Hartline after he spent the year taking over the room in 2018 for Zach Smith because of off the field problems, you're a genius for hiring from within. When you promote Corey Dennis to be your be your quarterback's coach, not so much of a genius. You should have found an outside hire. When you promote Parker Fleming to your special teams coordinator, not so much of a genius. You should have made an outside hire. But at the time, he said something. This is not direct quote because it's been years. But this idea of why does a guy have to leave to come back? Why does he have to go out in the world and gain experience when I know what he is already? And you kind of alluded to that earlier, Stefan. We were talking about some of the GAs who have been leaving. These guys could come back around 3, 4, or 5 years ago with more experience, and they could be assistant coaches at Ohio State. How many times have we talked about a guy who comes to Ohio State? It's like, oh, he has ties already. And Ryan Day's answer to that, I think this was in 2020, was about why does that have to happen? Why do you have to have the middle part? Why can't I see something in you, identify it, and then promote it and use it here? And you never have to leave the building. And I'm wondering if with Brian Hartline, it worked the first time he did it with Hartline. I'm wondering if it could work again. But even if you don't do it that way, even if you go find a young guy, I just think this past year was about Ryan Day proving to himself he was ready to do this. And it got him a ring, so why would you go backwards? So maybe this time you go get a young guy who looks like he's ready to do this, but also that coordinator is working for an offensive-minded head coach. So if Ryan Day needs to do what he did during the season with both the defensive side and the offensive side, and that's go, this doesn't look right. Let's sit down as a head coach and a coordinator and let's figure this out. He can do that, and it made this team even better for it. So you guys are going to go old experienced guy, which I think is probably what he's going to do. I'm just open to young hotshot now, maybe in a way that I wouldn't have been open to a young hotshot a year ago.
I'm open to it as well. When you would ask, you'd kind of pose what would be the best mix of what would work and what Ryan Day would probably lean toward.
That's okay. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. To answer my question,
I'm hiring Will Stein.
Okay, that's fair.
You're not me. I'm a dog.
So the thing that's like interesting here to me is that like you brought up like Al Golden, and I think Al Golden's an interesting comparison because like Golden got hired at Notre Dame in 2022, came from the NFL, former head coach. He had been there, done that. That was also Marcus Freeman's first year as head coach. Like Marcus Freeman needed help there. He needed somebody who had been there to just say, "Help, please." Take it. I just take the defense. I'll be there when you need.
Al Golden was for him what Kevin Wilson was for Ryan.
Yeah, you needed that, and you wonder like, all right, have we advanced beyond that stage? I mean, look, we're like 2 years away, maybe a year away from every Ohio State fan wanting JT Barrett, who's now the quarterback's coach of the Bears, to be Ohio State's offensive coordinator. But like that's where we're at, and like it is funny that. Everybody immediately looks to who's the most famous alum that they can hire. But I think
that with your offensive line already.
Yeah, I know. But I think that like when you look
the problem is it keeps working.
When you look at the coordinator position, it's not crazy to say, you know what, we're established. Like Ryan Day has kind of found a groove here, I think, especially with the playoff run and the national championship. Like, all right, he's got maybe a little bit more leeway. Okay, let's shoot for the moon every year because we just saw what shooting for the moon got you, and it was winning a national championship. So I don't think it's crazy. And then, every year, every 2 years, we're doing this all over again. Who's the next name that they can go get? Stefan might as well just copy paste his article every single year, every single 2 years, where it's just like, all right, well, this coach is leaving. He took a job at X and now he's gone. He's now the head coach at Virginia Tech. He's now the head coach at Kentucky. He's now the offensive coordinator for the Bills, and you're just like going through every year, you just replace the names that they're just churning them out. But that's okay. You know who else did this? Nick Saban. Nick Saban every year, I know his background is defense, but every year it felt like he was just hiring. It was the Saban school for wayward coaches. He would just hire a new offensive coordinator. He would bring in people who hadn't been, hadn't been coaches in a while, or, needed a fresh start or whatever. And then you bring in somebody like Saban did with Tommy Rees. Now Tommy Rees is the offensive coordinator for the Browns. It's like, you wonder, okay, maybe you just go. You almost know it's going to be a short-term fix. Like, I think if you hire Kevin Wilson, I think you need to be ready for, all right, if this goes really well, like Kevin Wilson might be here for a couple of years. Like this might not be a 1 to 2 year swing, and in a sport that churns everything all the time over and over and over, consistency is really good, but I think you almost need to be okay with that and say, like, you know what, let's just shoot for the moon and let's go get the young hotshot who, all right, he's going to be here a year or two, and we know he's going to get a better job because this guy's on a really high trajectory. This guy's got a really high ceiling. Maybe that's the better scenario for that.
I don't think you ever hire a coordinator thinking he's going to be there more than 3 years.
I agree with you, but
that's why Urban Meyer used to do the 2-year thing. It was kind of more of a handshake, but yeah, coordinators are not supposed to stick around that long. Speaking
of which, Stephen, I was going to say something before you said that. Maybe Ryan Day goes and hires his old boss again.
So let's take a break.
Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator.
They both know Ohio well.
I also love how we've just turned Ryan Day into Nick Saban already. It's like, hey, he's going to do all this stuff too. Like, and we've all done it at different points. It's just, hey, is Ryan Day the new place for rehabilitating head coaches to come get their careers back on track? Yeah, because they're winning natties every other year.
Here's what I will say on that too. It helped Nick Saban a ton that his offensive coordinators came in and always had really good players to work with.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, like, Tommy Rees suddenly became an amazing offensive coordinator. Well, yeah. Look at the roster that he had.
Yeah.
Like, that's why it's like, I really do hope that Chip Kelly has taught Ryan Day to trust in that aspect, because there are a lot of coordinators who can come in and make this Ohio State offense hum. Like, they're like, I have no doubt that Kevin Wilson would do a great job with this offense. Like, Joe Moorhead has not been a great head coach. He's been a great coordinator wherever he's been. Ohio State saw that when he was at Oregon. Like, he can come in and I think do a good job with this offense. So I really hope Ryan Day has kind of learned to be able to hand that over, because there are a lot of guys who can come in and make this Ohio State offense stay good.
Mainly because they're going to look at the weapons that are being brought in every year and going, oh, the ingredients for a gourmet meal already exist.
There was a lot of countries or a lot of players throughout the country that were watching that game on November 30th being like, I know what I would do in this situation.
Literally. We were saying it, and we're not even coordinators.
Michigan's coaches were saying it.
Yeah, I feel like Michigan's game plan was, let's see if we can bait them. And then midway through the second quarter, they went, oh, we're baiting them. Wait, what? They're doing this? And then Ohio State said, we're not going to do that anymore. They won a national title. Okay, that's the offensive side of the ball. I think that was more maybe of a wild, wild west conversation, because there is this extra element of it's also your head coach's side of the ball. So you have to take that into account when you're making these conversations. I think it's a little less complicated with the defensive side of the ball. So we'll get into that when we come back from the break here on Buckeye Talk.
Hey, Atlanta, Apple is open for small business. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. With privacy and security built in on all devices, it's easy for you to protect your customers' data. And if you need hardware or software support, you'll get advice from business experts at no cost whatsoever. So you can focus more on the soup du jour and less on, the other stuff. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
You know what's smart? Enjoying a fresh gourmet meal at home that you didn't have to cook. Meet Factor, your loophole in the laws of mealtime. Chef-crafted meals delivered with a tap, ready in just 2 minutes. You know what's even smarter? Treating yourself without cheating your goals. Factor is dietitian approved, chef prepared, and you plated. Pretty smart, huh? Refresh your routine and eat smart with Factor. Learn more at factormeals.com.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. We're talking about Ryan Day and who he should hire as his next coordinator. It's not necessarily who, I should say that, more of a what should he hire as his coordinators. I think, Stefan, on the offensive side, it's a very different descriptions. I personally think there is only one description he should go with on defense because of the way he operates. He wants you to be the head coach of the defense. He's not going to get involved unless things go haywire and you give up 32 points to Oregon, and now he has to get involved, or you give up 35 points to Oregon in 2021, and he has to get involved. He wants you to have full autonomy, full trust. There is no conversation of, is Ryan Day can trust anybody? Is he ready to give it up? No, it's do your thing over there, and I'm here if you need me. So I think he needs to find another Jim Knowles. And that is a established dude. Whether it's an established dude at an elite program, whether it's an established dude at the NFL level, or it's an established dude at a middle level program where you have to add the context of, well, it's inconsistent in their numbers because they're inconsistent in terms of how much talent they get at this program. So imagine if you give him the Ohio State players, what he can do, which is essentially what Jim Knowles was. Oklahoma State had a couple of good years, and then you went, man, I'll give him Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Denzel Burke, Davis Igbenos, and Jordan Hancock. Oh, and then on the third year, when everything's done, on the third day, they will Caleb Downs. And we're all like, yeah, that sounds like an elite defense. Well, it was. I think that's the only option for defensive coordinator. I don't think he can take chances with guy who's never done this before because you can't waste talent, especially when your talent is this young and inexperienced the way it is this year.
Yeah, I think this opening specifically is so interesting because you are essentially asking someone to be the head coach of the defense. And that's where I've always thought the McArary discussion has been interesting because he does have an experience of a year at Indiana calling plays. But that was on a staff where, Tom Allen's on the hot seat and he's a defensive coach. And yeah, you're calling plays, but you're not necessarily the head coach of the defense. And is McArary, even if it's, a co-DC thing with Tim Walton, is he ready for that? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. That's why I've leaned toward, I think I would follow your route, Stephen, of go find the Jim Knowles. Go find the best defensive coordinator in the country. Like, I would call Pete Golding at Ole Miss. Look at the year that they just had. And he's a guy who he just followed this formula, right? Like he worked for Lane Kiffin. I guarantee Lane Kiffin gives his defensive coordinators a lot of reign of how they want to run their defense. And I think that would be exactly what Ohio State's looking for. It's like something like that, I think is the best route. So I'm with you 100%. But I don't know if that's the route that Ryan Day is going to go. We saw the way he talked about Guerreri. We keep hearing Walton and Guerreri co-DCs getting mentioned, throughout the beat. Like we'll see what happens because I genuinely don't know which route he's going to go with this hire. There's a lot of options out there, but if I'm him, I'm calling all the best coordinators in the country, making them say no first, and then you kind of figure it out from there. We've heard. His first name slipped in my mind. Cullen, the defensive line coach for the Chiefs. What's his first name? Joe
Cullen.
Yeah. We've heard his name mentioned. So here's my one thing on that. I don't know if he is or if he isn't a serious candidate, but if he is someone that Ryan Day wants to interview, we at least know that this hire is probably not getting made until after the Super Bowl. So it seems like there's going to be some time. I mean, they're going to do it before spring practice, but there's going to be some time over the next few weeks for this decision to be made. So that gives Ryan Day a ton of time to reach out to a lot of coordinators. Like there's a lot of coaches throughout the country that are dealing with recruiting stuff this week. Wednesday is technically signing day. Also, there's a lot of coaches on the road recruiting stuff like that. So maybe when this week passes, he can definitely, start getting in contact with some of these coordinators and making a strong push. We'll see. We'll see what the timeline looks like, but I don't think this is a move that, we're going to see within this next week get decided.
So allow me to play the side that Steven just played for the offensive side of the ball, because I actually think oppositely from you guys on this one. You guys keep saying Jim Knowles guy, you need somebody head coach the defense, you need somebody who's been there, done that, blah, blah, blah. We know the description. But is this not the perfect scenario to set someone up with young, we think this guy's really ascending? Like I'm kind of thinking Matt Guerreri here, but this could also be somebody else. This could also be somebody that you think, hey, like this guy is a really, really talented coach, like Georgia's defensive coordinator, whose name I forget, like that type of mold, right? Like people talk about him in the way that, you know, they talked about Lanning when he was there, where it's like, hey, 2-3 years, this guy's going to be a head coach, right? Like, I think that makes sense on defense because Larry Johnson is entrenched as your defensive line coach. James Laurinaitis is showing early signs of being a really, really, really good linebackers coach. The recruiting class he just brought in, very talented. I think it was impressive how we saw Cody Simon take a leap this year into a starting role and then play like college football's one of the best linebackers. I think Sonny Styles has some deficiencies in coverage and some deficiencies kind of on the field, but I think he got better. And I think that's what you can ask for. And I think he might be in line for a big jump in his fourth year. Tim Walton has obviously recruited the position very, very well at corner. Matt Guerreri, we don't really have a ton of sample size, but I thought look, Caleb Downs was going to be Caleb Downs, but the safeties did play well. The recruiting class was good. I think this makes sense to say the supporting cast is set up for you. The supporting cast is available to you. You can have all of this built up around you. It's kind of like, if you think about it in like roster building terms, it's like when you talk about like an NFL team where it's like, all right, we're going to build the line, and then we're going to draft the receivers, and then we're going to get the running back, and then we go get the quarterback. Once everything else is there, because what you don't want to do is hand somebody the keys to a kingdom where he's saying, hey, you got to redo this whole thing. And Ohio State's not in that position. And I think this just kind of makes sense to just basically say, let's go get the young guy because we've got everything else covered. Like, I don't care if you hire Jim Knowles 2.0 or Bill Belichick, who's 29 years old. I don't care. You are going to be in a situation where they're not going to look at James Laurinaitis and say, get out. They're not going to look at Tim Walton and say, get out. They're not going to look at these defensive guys and go, yeah, what you've been doing hasn't been working. So I just think that this makes sense to say, let's go get a young guy who can build this thing up. And I think I'm on that side of things right now.
So when I say old guy, I don't mind it being a young guy. I don't think it should be a first-time play caller.
Should be there's a difference between old and young and experienced and inexperienced.
Yes.
You can be young and experienced. You could be a 39-year-old play caller, yeah.
Because the last time the roster had the description it has right now, where it's a lot of promise on the roster, it's just a lot of turnover. Ryan Day went and got a guy who had never called plays before, and it didn't go well. It did not go well. So he's got a guy who's done this job. He's got to find a guy where it was so funny. 2021 is such a funny year. There were times that he was coming in and going, I can't do my job on offense because I got to help out with the defense. And we're all going, yeah, you're the head coach. You sort of should be helping out with the defense, Ryan. It kind of comes with the territory. But I understand what he's saying. You got to find someone where you can have full confidence that you're not going to have a, looking over their shoulder the entire time because you're not really sure what they're doing on that side of the ball. That's what I agree, Andrew. If they go find Dan Lanning, then sure, make that guy your defensive coordinator. And then somebody will make him their head coach in 2 years. But it's just, I don't think they can go. I think they can hire the Brian Hartline of offensive coordinators because of what Ryan Day is. I do not think they can hire the Brian Hartline of defensive coordinators because there is no Ryan Day over there at all. So you have to have some level of security blanket there. Any other things people want to say? I think this pod has gone. We've been going long, man, since the offseason. I don't know what happened. Guys got more talkative. You guys just have more energy? You guys have been bringing it, man.
We just had more free time. Like, I feel like during the season, we were like kind of like looking at our watches. We're like, we got to go. I got to write. I got to call somebody. I got to do this. I got to do that. I feel like during the season, like right now, we have like a 3-week kind of lull of like, all right, there's no pressing time deadlines for things. We don't have to be at availability in an hour.
The real answer is we haven't had to see each other in a while.
That's fair. That's a fair point.
Oh, guys miss each other. Oh,
no, I don't think it's that we missed each other. I think it's that we were sick of each other. Like when you sit in a car with somebody for 5 hours, then cover a game with them, and then come back the other way.
We were basically
in the car with them for 5 hours. I think you can be a little tired of them.
The three of us basically spent a month doing like a family vacation together.
We did. Oh, yeah. I saw you more than my own family.
Yeah,
which is hilarious because Stefan got back to Columbus and immediately hopped in the car to go to St. Louis to see his girlfriend. Like immediately,
What happened was my girlfriend saw them lose to Michigan, and she was like, "Oh, you're gonna have some free time." And then they made a run to the national championship.
I brought my girlfriend to the Rose Bowl, and I've never felt like a more neglectful significant other ever. I was like, man, I just don't have time to be around this woman.
Enjoy LA. Bye.
It sucked, man. It really sucked. I hated it for her and myself. I'm glad she went though, because she got to go to LA, but it was still kind of like, man, it's 11:30, and oh yeah, I haven't seen my girlfriend today.
Well, yeah, it's like you think about it, it's like, we haven't, like you said, it's like a family vacation. It's like we were laughing because after the Michigan loss, I remember I went and saw OU play in the MAC championship game up in Detroit. And I kind of like did the math on like working backwards from weekends. And I was like, I have not been at my apartment in the last like 5-6 weeks more than I've been at my apartment in the last 5-6 weeks. Like I've spent more time in California, Texas, Georgia, Indiana. I've spent in Virginia for Christmas. I've spent more time outside of my apartment than inside. It's crazy. We've been living out of a suitcase for 6 weeks.
I've chosen to believe that guys just miss being around each other, and that's the narrative I'm going to push because it fits with what I want it to be. It doesn't matter what you guys
also
have to say.
Shout out to Chip Kelly. He was the most interesting story in Ohio sports for about 12 hours. And then Myles Garrett
doing this podcast. We're doing this podcast, and Myles Garrett requests a trade. And it's very funny because like you can't see our faces as we do this, but Stefan, and I can all see each other. And I think we all got to see each other's reaction. I saw Steven go like his jaw dropped when he looked at his phone, and then immediately you see it. And then Stefan, his eyes pop out of his head, and then 2 seconds later you get the Twitter notification. Stefan Krajisnik has retweeted Mary Kay Cabot. And it's like, it's like, all right, we all saw it at the same time.
I just didn't realize that players could publicly do that. It's the lack of listen, the Browns are not very good, and they're wasting a generational edge rusher. So I get that he's asking for a trade. He put out a public statement that he was asking for a trade. And I don't know. You can't do that in the NBA. I don't know if you can do that in the NFL. In college, you can't do it either. At least not right now. I guess check in on college football.
Well, see,
Jimmy Butler just did it.
Yeah, we have one dear texter.
But like, it was through his agent. It wasn't just him straight up coming out and saying it.
True. We have one dear texter in Dallas who was texting us this weekend about
that guy.
His losses this weekend with his NBA franchise. I do apologize. I forget his name, but I do apologize for him. But that's how things work in sports. You put it out there that you want to trade. You survey the market. You see where things are at with your team. You see where things are at with your contract situation. You don't just do a backdoor deal where you don't know what in the world you're talking about when you're trading a Hall of Fame talent. I don't know, hypothetically. That was all hypothetical, just in case. How do we get into NBA talk at the end of this?
It's life, man.
It was the biggest trade in sports history. It's all right.
That's a fair point. Yeah. What would the Ohio State equivalent of Luka Doncic for AD be?
giving up Jeremiah Smith for
Ryan Williams.
No, it's not even for Ryan
Not
Williams.
even.
It's like giving up Jeremiah Smith. Who's the receiver that's coming back at Oregon? What, Evan Stewart? Or Ted
That's
Johnson?
actually exactly what it would be.
It's Jeremiah Smith or
They're
Ted.
both
Hey,
good.
we're gonna get the veteran leadership on our
Yeah.
team.
Yeah, that would. We'd be like, Mark, Ryan, what are you doing? what you doing? Anyway, the good thing is we don't have to deal with trades at the college football level. It's, at least not right now. I guess we'll see. We'll check in on the sport in a couple of years. Get the text 614-350-3315. Ryan Day now having to hire 2 coordinators and an offensive line coach this offseason. Maybe we'll talk with him this week about it. Maybe we won't talk with him because it is technically signing day still on Wednesday because that day still exists in February, even though everybody signs in December. But it is what it is. Fun stuff planned for this week. We're going to rank the players one last time to close out the 2024 roster just to see where we think guys ended up landing. It's time to check in on all our preseason Market Down Monday predictions and see where guys got right, where guys got wrong, and you guys are in trouble.
Yep.
I'm just letting you guys know that right now. I'm going to give you both some reprieve because, Andrew, this was your first full year on the beat, so you were still getting to know things. And, Stefan, you got here. I don't think you knew who 100% of the roster was until the media day at the Cotton Bowl, but it is what it is. You made your picks, and so we're going to see where guys got some things right, where guys got some things wrong, plus a few other things this week as well. So get the text 614-350-3315. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. For Stefan Krajisnik and Andrew Gillis, I'm Stephen Means, and that was Buckeye Talk.